So in this video, we're going to create another enemy. This enemy we're going to be creating is Blaster. So this is what the enemy does in the original game. He has a hard shell that opens up and then he starts shooting bullets at different angles. So we're going to be making this guy today. So let's close that and go over to Unity. So this is the whole previous project, the camera transition project. So we're going to start with this. So we're going to get this out of the way. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the graphics and our enemies, and we're going to cut his frames out. So go to the editor, and he's over here, and he comes in 3 colors. He's red, orange, and blue. So we're going to start with cutting these out. We're going to do one by one, and then we'll rename them after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it here, and then we'll go through each one, and so you can get what I name them and where the pivots are and everything. And actually, I'm just going to say that we're going to put the pivot in the middle on the left side. So on each frame, it's always going to be like right here. So I'm going to pause it here, and then we'll come back to this. Okay, we're back. So first frame, let's just do this real quick so you can see basically you're gonna just draw your boxes over each frame. So there's no spacing in between any of them. So let's take that off. So our first one is going to be called, you can name them however you want, but we're going to do Blaster, and there's 4 frames and 3 colors. So Blaster 1 red. And what you'll do is change the pivot to custom. The X is going to be 0 and the Y is going to be 0.5 on every frame. So first one's going to be Blaster 1 red, Blaster 2 red, 3 red, 4 red, and then 1 orange, 2 orange, 3 orange, 4 orange, and then 1 blue, 2 blue, 3 blue, 4 blue. And like I said, all the pivots are all the same on all of them. So just change it to custom and then just set the coordinates on each one of them so that they're all the same. So we're going to apply it, exit out of it, and next we're going to create our game object. So we're going to right click over here and we're going to create an object. We're going to call it, well, before we do that, reset it, and then we're going to call it Blaster. And Blaster, all of our enemies that use that sheet have all been changed to scale to 1.5. And you're going to tag it with enemy, and you're going to set the layer to enemy as well. And then you're going to add component and add on our enemy controller script. So it's going to put on all the required components here. So first what we'll do is down here over in the sprite renderer, we're going to go and expand the enemies, and we're going to go find Blaster, and we're just going to drop in Blaster 1 blue first. So we're going to drop that in. Let's bring this over real quick so you can see what's going on. So Blaster is down here. So the green box is the box collider, which what we're going to do is reset that so that it changes its dimensions. And right click on the box collider section here, and then you're going to reset it. And now it's going to change the box collider to the outside of the entire frame or the sprite there. So what you're going to do is change the dimensions. So the size is going to be 0.07 and 0.15, and it's going to bring it 1 pixel in all around. So that's good. And then our rigid body is not going to be dynamic. This guy, he's stationary. So we're going to change our rigid body to static because he doesn't move. And back on the sprite, we're going to change the layer order to 10. And let's go to the website real quick. So these are the parameters for our Blaster. He's worth 200 points. He has 1 health. His damage, if you touch him, if Mega Man touches him, he causes 1 damage health. and 2 when you get hit by one of his bullets. So we're going to change that. So our score points are going to be 200. The contact damage, well, the health is 1. The contact damage is 1. Our bullet damage is going to be 2. And we'll just leave the bullet speed at 3. Our bonus item settings, we're going to change, he drops random items. And for the audio clips, move that out of the way, our audio clips are going to be set to, let's go to the audio sounds. All right, so damage clip is going to be 9, so enemy damage of 9. And then even though he doesn't, no, actually he does, never mind. He has invincible, so we need to use the dink so that when he's invincible and he gets hit by Mega Man's bullet, he makes that sound. And our, let's see, enemy shoot, which is 10, and there's no refill on this guy. And we're going to fill these in a sec. So that's the main, those are the main parameters for him. So now right click on him and create an empty. So this empty, it's going to be called hitbox. So we're going to add on the hitbox, and the layer is going to be default, and there's no tag on this, and the transforms all the default. So we're going to add on a box collider because this is going to be the trigger, so that we know if we hit him or not, or if we touch him. And what we'll do is we're going to go back over to the parent, right click on the box collider, copy the component, go over to the hitbox, and then on that box collider, right click and paste the values. So it just puts in the offsets and the size, but make it a trigger. And then what we'll do is right click on blaster again, create another child, and change the layer back to default. This child is going to be our bullet shoot position. And there is no parameters on this, but what we're going to do is we're going to change the gizmo on it to the little yellow circle, and then we need to set its position. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to change his graphic real quick, and then we'll change it back. So go back over to the graphics, and then what we're going to look for is blaster 4, doesn't matter what color, so that we know where the bullet spawn point is, and which is going to be about right there at the tip. So that's where we want our gizmo to be. So we're going to go back to bullet shoot position, and then we can change the X on that by dragging it over. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set it to, I believe it is 0.145 is what I calculated. It's a pretty good spot. So if you go in here and you zoom, it's kind of like right here in the center of where the barrel is. So we're going to have our bullet shoot position right there. So now you can go back to the main blaster and change the graphic back. So we just needed that to see where our bullet shoot position is going to be. So we can go and drag blaster 1 blue back over to the sprite and leave it like that. So then now we can set our positions in prefabs. So our bullet shoot position, our bullet prefab, which is in our prefabs folder, which we created a long time ago. So that's in projectiles. And we can actually get this out of the way again. And we're going to drag over the bullet for that. And our explosion for this guy, he does a small explosion. So under prefabs and effects, it's going to be explode effect 1. So we're going to drag that there. So he's pretty much all filled out for right now. We're going to do the animations next. So what we'll do is, before we do that, we're going to go to scripts, and we're going to create a new controller for this guy. So right click, create C# script, and it's going to be called blaster controller. I think there'll be a point where we're going to create a folder in here. We're going to drag all of our enemy scripts into that just to kind of organize this. But for right now, we'll just have everything out in the open. And then we're going to double click on blaster controller just so we have it open in Visual Studio. And I double clicked the wrong one. Blaster controller. Okay, so that's that. So we can go back over to Unity and back onto Blaster. we're going to drag blaster controller down here, and the properties will fill in once we start working on the script. We'll be doing that in a very short bit. So those are all set. So we're going to work on the animations now. We're going to have to go back and forth a little bit because in his animations we actually use events, and we're not going to be able to actually tie the functions to those events until we write out the script. So we're going to create the animations. We'll go and fill in the rest of it after. So go to animations under assets, go into enemies. We're going to create a new folder, and it's going to be called Blaster. And then inside of Blaster, we're going to right click and we're going to create a new animator controller called Blaster. And then we're going to create the two animations. They're basically empty dummy animations, placeholders really. And then one's going to be called Blaster Closed, and the other is going to be called Blaster Open. And the reason is because we're going to be doing the animator controller overrides for the colors. So those animations are actually going to override these. So double click on the blaster, go back over to project. We're going to link in the closed one, so highlight that. Back over to animator tab, right click, create state from empty. So the default's going to be closed. And then back over to project tab, highlight open, go to animator, right click, and create state, and from empty, and then open. So that's the other state. So he only has two states. And then you can go back over to project. So from in here, we're going to create the override we're going to do the blue one first, and then we're going to basically end up duplicating those after we fill them all in and just change the sprites in them for each color. Because it's all going to be the same content in each of them. So then we're going to do an animator controller override called Blaster Blue. And then we're going to do an animation. Actually, did I name that right? Hold on a second. Well, sorry. Say blaster underscore blue, because then we're going to have, doesn't really matter what you name them. It's just kind of like keep like a certain schema about it. And then we're going to have an animation called blaster open blue. And we'll duplicate that, Control D, and then it's going to be blaster closed blue. Okay, so these are the overrides. So if we go to blaster blue, the main one here, we're going to drag over the main controller, which is plain old blaster, and then you can see these are the two animations that are tied to the controller. So then these are the overrides that we're going to set. So we're going to set the closed blue and the open blue. So these are going to basically overtake these. All right, so now we can actually go over to our blaster here, and we're going to drag on the blue because we need to set these up. So with blaster blue, we're going to go to closed, and I'm going to note there is no loop time on these. These animations do their thing, play through, and then we're going to be changing states in the script. So he's got two states. He's either open or he's closed, and in each of those states we have animation events happen. So in closed, it's just basically his shell is closed. We're just going to change the sample rate to 1. And over in the open, we're going to change the sample rate to 12. And so back over to closed, we're going to add in the sprite. And on the sprite, where is that? Go back to graphics, and we're working the blue one right now. And we know that blue one is closed, so we're going to drag that in there, and then we can collapse that. So there. So that's that. And on this, we are going to add an event. So we're just going to put an event on that frame. So what's going to happen is this is going to be an event's going to happen as soon as this animation plays, and what that event's going to do is it's going to set him to his invincibility property to true. So if Mega Man's bullets start hitting him, it's going to play the ding sound. It's not going to decrease his health, and he's not going to die. And so this is the only frame and event on this closed state. So then we're going to go over to open. This one's a little bit more drawn out. So we're going to, let's see, first we're going to do the, I think we add in 2, 3, and 4. So let's do 2, blaster 3, and blaster 4. And before I move on, I'm going to double check this, so hold on a minute. Nope, that's right. Okay, so then what we're going to do is, this is actually 25 frame animation. And the reason it's that long is because of when you start shooting the bullets. So it's going to open up, gets here, it's going to play events through this point, and then he's going to close back up. So we're going to look for frame 23. Almost there. There, frame 23. So on frame 23, we're going to do blue 4, and then 3 and 2. So blue 3 and blue 2. So then we're going to add on the events. Okay, so events, why does this look so light? I'm going to bring this over. That's as close as that gets. So on frame 0, we're going to add an event, which is going to, I believe, turn off the invincibility, among other things. Then on frame 2, we'll have an event, which is going to be able to shoot bullet. And then on frame 9, we're going to have shoot a bullet. On frame 16, we're going to shoot a bullet. And on frame 23, we're going to shoot a bullet. And on frame 25, this is going to basically tell it to switch its state back to closed. And so then that will trigger the other event on the closed state, which will put them back into invincible mode. So we're not going to mess with the box collider on this. The box collider is pretty much in the same spot. It'll be about here, but his barrel will come out a little bit, but that's not a big deal. The next video we're going to be doing screwdriver, and his is a little bit different because his he raises up, and so we have to move his collider, or actually stretch it out a little bit. So now we have all the events, so we're going to save this, but we're not going to duplicate this yet until we create the code to do the bullet firing. And once we have those functions set and we put them in here, then we can duplicate the rest of these animations and then just change the graphics color for each of the other colors for the overrides. So let's just save that. So now we're going to get to the code. And let's see. First thing, actually, over in the scripts, we're going to change the game manager. So in the game manager, we're going to go down to, I think it's line 312 here. So in our spawn enemies function is where we basically got the component of the asset palette. Well, we're going to move that out because we've disabled this function in the main game loop so it doesn't spawn enemies. And because of that, it's never going to generate the asset palette. So we're actually going to move this out of here. And then we're going to go and put it in the awake function. So when the game manager gets created, it'll create the asset palettes then. So after this don't destroy on load, we're going to drop it there and save. So our asset palette will be created when the game manager gets created. So it'll always be there. And this is pretty much only, this line here about the prefab count only has to do with because we randomly spawn enemies, and we're eventually, when we get towards the end of the Mega Man series, we're actually probably going to end up building out an actual level from the actual game and try and replicate it as close as possible so it's just like the game. So we wouldn't even need this anyway. So that's what we're going to do with the game manager. That's the only change we're going to do. The other change we're going to do is we're going to go over to our utility functions because we need another function, and that has to do with the bullets. So let's go back over here and go to our utility functions. So here we're going to create a new function, and this actually, I'm not a math wizard or anything like that, but what this function does is it's going to change the angle of the bullets when we fire them. And the reason we change the angle of the bullet is because our blaster has, what we're going to do is four orientations. We're going to have it so he can sit on the left side, so he's going to end up firing right, which is kind of like his default orientation, or we can have him on the right side facing left, so that would mean our bullets are going to travel on the left, but we're actually going to add in a little bit something extra, which I don't believe is in the original game, where we can have him sitting on the floor, so that would cause his bullets to fire upward, or we can have him up on a ceiling, which would cause his bullets to fire downward. So to be able to move the bullets and have them go in the directions that we want, we need this function, which is going to be called rotate by angle. So rotate by angle. And it's going to have two parameters. First parameter is going to be a vector2 called vector. And the other one is going to be a float, which is called angle. So rotate by angle. And I don't remember where I found this. I might have been in a forum post somewhere. It wasn't actually the function that I found, it was the formula. And so I wrote the function out myself. So vector2 nv, and then we're going to say float theta. Like I said, I don't know much about this stuff. This is not one of my specialties, like this type of math having to do with like geometry and trigonometry and everything like that. But I know that this works. So degree to rad. So we need to convert the degrees to radians. And so that will be theta, the angle. And then we're going to say the cosine, which is CS, is going to be equal to math F dot cosine of theta. And then we need the sine. So math F sin of theta. And then what we're going to do is nv dot x is going to be what we pass, the x, times the cosine minus vector y times sine. And then nv dot y is going to be vector x times sine plus vector y times the cosine. And then we're going to return the new angle, or the new vector that's with the new angle of it. So let me double check this real quick. So vector theta angle times CS cosine theta. Sine is equal to math of sine theta, and then nvx is vector x times cosine minus vector dot y times the sine, and then the nv dot y is equal to vector x times the sine plus vector dot y times cosine. Return that. Yep. Okay. So this is the function. So what we're going to do is you pass it the current, whatever the original vector is, and whatever angle you want it to be, that vector to be, I guess you could say, rotated to, and then it'll come back and give you the result of that in this nv parameter here. So it's going to return it. So this is how you can rotate it. So why? Well, whenever you ever had a game that you had bullets that follow the mouse around, the mouse is at a certain angle, but the bullet originally the original vector is like going on from left to right. Well, you can basically rotate that around so it follows the mouse, and so your bullet will always follow that direction. So you could use that for this, or this for that as well. So we need that to be able to work with Blaster, and we actually also need to work with the next animator we create, which will be Screwdriver. because he's going to be able to sit bottom, top, left, and right as well. So now we're going to go to the blaster script, and we're going to create our blaster code. And to start with this, we're going to define a bunch of parameters first. So the first one's going to be to our animator. And then this is much like all the others in their box collider, which is called box 2D. And then our rigid body, which is called RB2D. And then our enemy controller, which is, we're going to say enemy controller. So the animator, the box 2D, the rigid body, and the enemy controller. Next one that we need is an integer called bullet index, which we're going to initialize at 0. The bullet index is basically, he fires 4 bullets and they go in different directions. And so what we're going to have in our ShootBullet is actually going to be an array of 4 vectors. And what this is going to do is be an index into that array of that vector. So each time we call it, it's going to basically pull which direction that bullet's going to go, and it's going to increment. And then the next time you call it, it's going to pick the next vector to use. And when it gets the end of the index, it'll reset back to 0. So that's how. So it kind of makes it like a little bit of like a static function to remember where it left off in shooting in the array. So each time you call it, it's going to be a different vector that shoots. So it's not like you have to have that set function, 4 times for 4 different directions. So this will be basically how to keep track of which bullet is being fired. And then we need bullet script, and of the type of bullet types. And so this is how we know which bullet type we're firing. And if you remember in one of the previous videos, we basically kind of set up all of our enemy and player bullets in there as like a struct, and all the properties already built out in the bullet prefab. So this is where you're saying which bullet do we want to use. And then we're going to have some timers that have to do with the animations. So we're going to have a float called close timer, and then we're going to create a public float called close delay, and we're going to default that to 2 seconds. So this is how long he'll be stayed closed for before he opens up, so 2-second delay. Then we're going to have a bool called do attack, and then another public and float, and this is going to be called player range. Now, I don't know if in the game this is really how it works, but this is how I'm doing it in R. So it's not going to, when this enemy gets loaded and he starts up, he's not just going to start firing right away. What we're going to do is we're going to see where the player is in the scene, and if the player happens to be within, we'll just say these 2 units, then that's when it'll activate, and it's going to activate do attack, so that he'll start his attack and he'll start shooting. So that's how we're going to know. All right, so then what we need is a public enum called blaster colors, and this is much like all the other ones that have multiple colors. We have an enum. We're going to define each of the colors. So blue, orange, and red. And then, actually, it works with and without the semicolon. Then we're going to use a serialized field, and that's going to be called blaster colors, called blaster color, and then we're going to default to blue. So then we have another public enum called blaster state, and he has 2 states, and he's closed or he's open. Those are his 2 states. And then we'll have a serialize of that so we can use it in the inspector. And well, actually we don't use it in the inspector, but we can see what's happening in the inspector. The animation is what's actually going to trigger, what state that he's in and everything. So we're going to say blaster state, and by default his state will be closed. Then one more public enum called blaster orientation. And then we're going to call it, or actually before we call it, there he's going to have 4 orientations. He's going to have bottom, where he's sitting on the bottom, where he's on the top, where he's on the left, or he's on the right. And then we're going to have serialized. Now this one you will set in the inspector yourself, depending on how you want him to be oriented. So blaster orientation, blaster, this one we'll call it blaster orientation, and by default his orientation we're going to have as left. So he's sitting on a wall, his left side where he faces open, and he opens right. So that's going to be what we have there. Then some more serialized, and these actually have to do with the runtime animator controllers. And we're going to say RAC blaster blue. And we're just going to copy this. 2 more because we have an orange one. And what do we have? A red one. So those are all the variables that we have. So then what we're going to do in our start is we're going to use the enemy controller. And we're going to get the component of that, and we're going to use the enemy controller. And then we're going to use the animator. Is equal to the enemy controller. And then that's the animator. Not animation, but animator. And then what we'll do, then what we'll do is we're going to just copy that and do that for the box collider and the rigid body. So box 2D, and then that's box collider 2D, and that's rigid body 2D, and rigid body 2D. So that's our, technically that was actually supposed to be in our awake function, so we're just going to say wait awake, get rid of that, doesn't really matter. And we're just going to take those and move those up, because those are actually supposed to be in the awake at the start. In the start, what we're going to have is a function called set color, and then that's going to be of blaster color, and we don't have this function yet, but we will define it, and then one called set orientation. So those are the functions that will happen in the start. So what we'll do first here in the update, before we go and actually fill out the update, is we're going to say if the enemy controller dot freeze enemy, this is much like in the other ones that we have, we're going to do return. Now, like Killer Bomb and Peppy, we have a time discrepancy where we have to account for when he's frozen. This guy doesn't have that like the others, so we don't have to worry about messing with this. All right, so we're going to come back to the update. So let's do the other things first. So we're going to create a public void set color of blaster colors, and we're just going to call it color, pass color. And inside a color, we're going to say blaster color is equal to color, whatever we're passing to it, so we set that value. Then we're going to call another function that we haven't defined yet called set bullet type. Set bullet type is going to be based off of whatever color. So, and then we're going to do another one which we've used in other enemies called set animator controller, which we haven't defined yet in here. Okay, so then first one we're going to define is going to be the animator controller. And the set animator controller is going to be based off of the color, so we're just going to say switch blaster color. In the case of blaster colors, and we'll say blue, break, and then we're going to fill this out. And then we'll copy it and do the other one. So animator dot runtime animator controller is going to be equal to the blue. So then we're going to copy this stuff here and we're going to drop it in 2 more times. So the next one's going to be the orange. And we're going to set the orange and then the red. Okay, so that's our animator controller. So the next function, save all that. Next function we're going to do is set bullet type. So void set bullet type. And that's also based off the color. So switch blaster color. And then we're going to say case blaster colors blue again. Actually, we could have probably just did it all on here, but it is, retrospect is what it is. So blue, then we're going to say, we do this in case we need to do anything extra with the bullets in the future, so we don't have to break it out. It's not a big deal. So bullet type is going to be equal to what? From our bullet scripts, we have bullet types. What kind of bullet type do we want? Well, these are all the ones that we have set up. So we have the blue, the green, the orange, the pink, and the red. And these are all the enemy bullets. The default one is Mega Man's actual bullet. So what we want for when Blaster is blue, we want him to shoot blue bullets. So copy that. Then we're going to do it for the other colors. And then, so the next one is orange. But the thing about the orange is we call them orange. It's more of a, if you look up the color, it's more of a bittersweet. And we actually do have a literal orange bullet. So we don't want to use that because it doesn't quite look right. So we're going to use the one that's called pink. And that actually looks closer, or closer to what his actual color is. So we're going to use the pink bullet on this. So. And then the last one's red, which is actually a red. So we use the red bullet. So based off the color, we're going to set up our bullet that we want to use. So save that. Next one we're going to do is the orientation. This one should be fun. So void set orientation. Okay, so this is also this isn't based off of the color, but it's based off the orientation. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do transform dot rotation, and we're going to reset the rotation. So we're going to use the identity. So that resets the transform's rotation back to default. Then we can basically use our orientation and rotate based off of those now that everything's back to normal or normalized. So blaster orientation, we're going to switch off of that. So inside of here we have a case of orientation bottom, and we're going to break there. So we're going to do that. We're going to copy that and edit each of those. So bottom, so we usually normally use the flip function, but because this guy can go in any direction, we're just going to be creating our own here. So we're going to rotate. And we're going to do these manually. So 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, but 90 degrees on the Z. And we're going to copy that. So this will basically, normally his graphic is basic left to right. Rotating 90 degrees is going to basically go counterclockwise, and he's going to basically be sitting on his back is going to be on the floor, and he's going to be facing upward. So that's rotating 90 degrees on the Z. So let's copy that and then drop in the others. So next orientation is the top. Now the top is basically the opposite. It would be facing left to right, but if we do negative 90, he's going to basically turn downward. So his back is going to be up here and he's facing down. So that's the top. The next one is left, which we don't change anything on the rotation, so that's all zeros. And then on the right, we're going to basically be changing this back to 0, but on the Y, it's going to be 180 degrees. So that'll basically kind of flip him, mirror him. So he's going to be going from face, he's going to have his right side, his back on the right, and he's going to face left at that point. All right, so that's the set orientation. The next one is shooting the bullet. But yeah, we're going to do shoot the bullet now. So actually, you know what? Before we get to the bullet, let's that's all right. We'll do the bullet. So private void shoot. We'll get to the update function after this. So shoot bullet. All right, so shooting the bullet. So this is much like all the other enemies that shoot the bullets. However, what we're going to do is we need a game object called bullet. And then what we need is an array of vector 2s. And these are going to be the bullet vectors, because we saw that he basically shoots a little bit to the up, a little bit to the, goes kind of to the right, kind of a little bit down on the right, and then down. So he shoots 4 bullets, and they're all going in different directions. So this is going to be called bullet vectors. And then we're going to close that. So first vector, and these have all been calculated by trial and error, the best approximation to get the right angle and everything, or in the right direction. So 0.75 f and then 0.75 f. So that's the first bullet. The next bullet vector, actually, you know what, let's do this. Nuke that, copy. The next one is going to be 1 and 0.15. The next one's going to be 1 and negative 0.15. So these are the middle bullets. So this one's like up a little to the right, down a little to the right. This one's up, you know, kind of like a 45-degree angle a little bit. And then this one is going to be negative 75. So it's basically like the opposite of this. So this goes up that way, and this one's going to go down that way. So those are our bullet vectors. And then what we need to do is based on the orientation. This is where we're going to use that function that we added over in utilities. So we're going to check the orientation. So blaster orientation. And we're going to basically move our bullets in the orientation of how he's set. So case of blaster orientation, we're going to just start with the left one. And in the left, we make no changes. By default, our vectors here assume that he's got his left here and he's facing right, and all these bullets are going to travel going positive along the X. So now the next case will be for being going to the right. And going to the right, what we're going to do is it's the same thing. However, they're going to travel negative on the X. And the easiest way I found to do this is we don't need to use the utility function for that. But what we're going to do is bullet vectors, bullet index, whichever bullet that we're working with right now, the X, and we're going to times that by -1. So that'll basically turn all the X's -1 so that all the bullets should normally go that way, they're going to go the other way. So it's going to basically negative, 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 negative. So that's what we're going to do there. So now we have the actual where we need to use the utility function. So we have the orientation. The first one we're going to use is the bottom. And what we'll do is we're going to just set this one up and then we'll copy it for the last one. So bullet vectors of bullet index, whichever bullet that we're currently working with, is going to be equal to utility functions and then the rotate by angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass the bullet of bullet index. And what angle? We're going to use 90 degrees. So when we were going bottom, we saw that we were 90 degrees there, so our bullets have to go in the same direction. So we're going to rotate our bullets 90 degrees. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and then we got to do the top. So when orientation is set to the top, it's going to be negative 90 degrees, just like we have here. So we rotate our blaster negative 90 degrees, and we're going to be rotating his bullets negative 90 degrees as well. So that's for the blaster orientation and rotating the bullets. So now what we have to do is actually spawn the bullet. So we're going to say bullet is equal to instantiate, and that's going to be of enemy controller bullet prefab. So that's our prefab that we're using, that we have in our enemy controller class. And bullet.name, because I don't like it how it shows up with the word clone and stuff. So enemy controller bullet prefab.name. We're going to override that. So now we're going to do the transform. So the bullet transform position is going to be equal to what? Our bullet shoot position that we set up. So enemy controller dot bullet shoot positions transforms position. There. So this is where the bullets are going to spawn from, where we set the bullet transform, basically that game object location. So then what we're going to do is we got to use our bullet script. So we're going to use one and copy it for the rest of these. Bullet get component, that's bullet script. And then what's the first function we're going to use? It's going to be set bullet type. And that's going to be what? We already set it up above, so it's going to be bullet type, and that's based off of our color. So we're just going to copy this, and then we need this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need this 6 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the next one, along with the type, is going to be set damage value. The bullet damage value is actually going to be from the enemy controller, and that's going to be called bullet damage. The next function is going to be set bullet speed, and that's also of enemy controller. And that's going to be bullet speed. So we set the speed of the bullet. And then we need to set the direction. So set bullet direction. And the direction is going to be based off of our current bullet and the bullet vectors. And that's used of the bullet index. The index is going to determine what bullet we're shooting. So that's the direction of the bullet. And then we need to do set collides to tags, and what the only one we want to be hitting is the player. So that's a tag we want to have our bullet collide with to register something. And then we're going to set the destroy time, or the destroy delay. And by default, we're going to do 5 seconds, because once it goes outside the camera view, the game manager will remove it out of the screen, or it'll basically disappear after 5 seconds. And then the last one we want is to actually shoot the bullet. So these are all the parameters to set up our bullet, and then we finally shoot it. So what we do then after that is actually where we track which bullet we're manipulating. So we're going to say if, and we're going to pre-increment. So bullet index. So we already used it here, but now we're going to pre-increment before we test it. So is greater than bullet vectors dot length minus 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and if this turns into 4, and that's obviously greater than this, so then what we'll do is that's when we reset it back to 0. So then we're going to say bullet index is equal to 0. So we reset it back. So after this gets called 4 times, it resets it back to 0. So the 5th time we call it, it'll basically shoot it from the first position again. So last is to play the sound. So we need sound manager dot instance dot play And which sound are we going to play? Well, that's over in the enemy controller. And that is the shoot bullet clip. So then we shoot it. As soon as this bullet's done going, and then we go, shoot it. Okay. So that is the shoot bullet function. So what we'll do is we'll fill out the rest of these functions, and then we're going to go to the main game loop for this guy, or his update loop. So we need the functions that have to do with the events and the animations. So the first one that we're going to define is a void, and that's going to be called Invincible animation start. So Invincible animation start. And all we're doing in here is we're going to use enemy controller, and we're going to say, we're going to call the invincible function and pass true. Okay, so now he's invincible. The next one we're going to do is a private void, and this is going to be called open animation start. So this is going to be called when we start up the open animation. So this is the first event. And then inside of here, we're going to basically copy this, and we're going to say false. So now he's no longer invincible as soon as he opens. And then what we're going to do is our last one here is a void. That's going to be called open animation stop. And in here, all we're going to say is no more doing attack. So do attack is false, in which we'll figure out how we're going to use that up there in the update loop. So no more attack, and we're going to change blaster state. Color, but the state. And the state is going to be equal to closed, because when he's open, he's going to now go back to closed. So we're changing the state back to closed. So those are the three functions that we use in our events for the animation, or in the animations. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do our main game loop. So go back up to update and go down a little bit. And inside of update, it's actually really, really short and really, really simple. So first thing we want to do is we're going to use a game object here, and it's going to be called player. And what we want to do is find our player. And then we're going to say find game object with tag. And what tag we're looking for? Excuse me, we're looking for the player tag. And why do we use this? Well, we'll get to that in a sec. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch upon his states. He has two states. Picking color. We want the states. So first state is he's closed, or he's what? He's open. Blaster state dot open. These are his two states. So inside of his closed state, first thing we want to do is we want to be playing the animator or the animation, and that is called blaster closed. So we're going to be playing our closed animation. So then what we want to do is we want to check if the player is not equal to null and do attack is false, which means we don't know what we're supposed to be attacking yet. And we do player is not equal to null, so that in case this guy is like taken out of the scene or whatever, like he just died, it doesn't throw an error and all that. So, and we need to know that he's not a null also, so we can check our distance. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a float called distance, and this is how we're going to calculate the distance between where our blaster guy is and where Mega Man is. So what we're going to use is vector2, and there's a function in there called distance. And this is going to calculate the distance between the two transform positions, so, or the two vectors. So we're going to check, first one we're going to pass is blaster's position, and then we're going to pass the player's transform position. So this is going to give us the distance between the two, and it's a float value. And so with that distance, we're going to say if distance happens to be less than or equal to the variable that we created up top, which is also exposed in the expector as public, called player range. which we have defaulted at 2, we're going to say if the player is within this distance, that's when we want to be able to attack, or when we want to start attacking. So we're going to say do attack is equal to true. And then with it being true, we're going to start up our closed timer is going to be equal to our closed delay. So there. So with that, we're going to go outside of here, and then what we're going to check and see is if do attack is true. So if do attack has been set, otherwise it's like no, no, no. Okay, set this. Yep, finally. And so do attack is true. And while we're inside of this, we're going to decrement close timer by time.delta time. So subtract, subtract, subtract the time, and then once we get down to closed timer being less than or equal to 0, which means that we run our course on the timeline. And then what do we want to do? We want to change our state. So blaster state is going to be equal to open. We're changing ourselves to open. So now we're open. So the next time this comes through here, well, we're not closed anymore. Now we're in open. While we're in open, the only thing we're going to do in here is play our open animation, because the events in the animation are going to be what fires the bullets and disables invincibility, etc. So this one's the most easiest of them all. There. So play open, and then when the animation reaches the end, the last frame has that event. They'll basically say, hey, go back to the closed state, etc., etc. So this is the logic in Blaster. So with all of this set in place, now if we actually go back over to Unity and we happen to look at Blaster and we go back down here to the bottom, you can see our close delay, the player range, we have all these variables all set. Now these are all defaults, which is fine, but the only thing we're missing here are the runtime animator controllers. But we can't really fill all these out yet because we haven't finished this part yet. So our first one, let's go back over to close. So our first event here is going to be what? Well, now we have all these things exposed up here. So we have Invincible animation start. So that's going to be, all right, we're closed. We want to be invincible. Boom, now we're invincible. So then when we go to open, the first thing we want to do is, sometimes this thing is weird. Go back over here to close. Right? And then if we go to open, yeah, there we go. All right, so then we want open animation start, and then over here at the end is going to be open animation stop. So animation start, animation stop. And then these 4 in here are basically the bullet firing. So all we're going to do on each of these is we're going to call shoot bullet. And that bullet index is going to be, okay, shoot the first vector, shoot the second vector, shoot the third vector, shoot the fourth vector. And then it'll reset when it gets to the end. So that's going to be shoot bullet. That's going to be shoot bullet. And then this last one here is going to be shoot bullet. So let's save it. So that's the blue. So we have that set up. So now if we go back over to Blaster, now we got to basically duplicate these and set up the other colors. Now that this is all filled in, and all that's going to basically be doing is just replacing the sprite. So blue, we're going to duplicate, we're going to call it orange. And then we're going to just duplicate that, and we're going to call that one red. And then our closed blue, we're going to duplicate, we're going to say closed orange. And then our open blue, we're going to duplicate, and we'll say open orange. And we'll just duplicate this one again. And we're going to say it's closed red. And we're going to duplicate that one. And we're going to call that one open red. So now the orange one, but before we do that, let's just change these real quick. So Blaster orange override. Right now, because we duplicate, it says blue, but so we want closed orange and open. Oh, shoot. orange, 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 there. And then open orange. So let's just make sure. Closed orange, open orange, and that's on orange, right? So then on the red one, we're going to say closed red, and then open red, and that's on the red and override. Okay, so now what we can do is if we go to blaster, we're going to have to change these. So now the next one we'll do is orange, so just set the orange one over there. So now we're on closed orange here, but then we have to go to graphics, and closed orange is going to be blaster 1. So that's done. Then we're going to go to open, and then that's going to be 2, 2, and then 3, and 3, that one, and 4, and 4. So there, that's it for orange. And then we're going to set the red. So now we got to go back over here. This is what I don't like about this. And then we got to set the red override. So we can set that. And then we're going to go back over to the graphics. So blaster 1 red is closed. And then on the open red, we have blaster 2, blaster 2, blaster 3, blaster 3, and blaster 4, and blaster 4. There. So now on the original blaster, what we can do is just use the main controller. So there. Just drop that over there on the animator. And now down here, we're going to set up the blaster blue and then all the overrides. So that's blaster blue, and then that's blaster orange, and then that's blaster red. And all these defaults are perfectly fine. Now we have this all filled out. Everything looks good. We're going to save him. And then we're going to create a prefab out of him. So then we're going to go down to our prefabs and enemies and drop him in there. Boom. Now he's a prefab. So let's move him to a new position, and we're going to drop in some of the other ones and we'll just test them out. So what we're going to do with this guy is he's going to go into negative 11.637. I've already calculated this out, and 3. And now if I bring this back over, and we'll just stretch this out a little bit, and then we can shrink this in. That basically, I have him sitting over here on the beam of the highway, the broken highway. So he's right here. And that's by default, he's on his left side. And then there's his bullet shoot position. So let's try this out and see what happens. If everything works, he should start firing once Mega Man's in place, or within a certain range. So Mega Man's all the way over here. Nothing so far. So I'm going to get over here. Oh, there he goes. And he's shooting bullets. And you see the one that goes outside the camera is getting deleted right away. So let's just come over here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the bullet index determines which vector is being picked for which bullet. So there we go. So let's just wait a second here. And you see, he dinked. So he's invincible. Alright. And then let's kill him. Oh, he's a little... Come on. I really stink at this. There he goes. And there was our random bonus item that got spawned, and it happened to be a weapon energy pickup. Okay, so he's gone. So now what we're going to do, let's check these orientations. So we're going to choose our blaster guy here, and let's just change, let's say going right. Now our bullets should travel, he should be like right facing left, and his bullets should go left. Now, ignore the fact that it's not going to look right. because he's stationary anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So there. Now he's facing that way. I'm just going to come over here. There, the bullets are firing in the opposite direction. And he's opening up and he's facing that way. So let's stop that. Let's try the other way. So let's assume he's on the bottom. So now the bullet should face up and we should see that rotate by angle take into effect. So now he's going to shoot upward. So there, now he's facing up, so our orientation for when we're rotating him is right. And there's our bullets. They're shooting in the right direction. They're being rotated in the right way. Okay, now let's do it the other way. Last one. So now we're going to go top, so now he should be facing downward. So now he's facing down. And they're not showing up yet. There they go. So now the rotate by angle is having the bullets go the other way. There we go. So let's try the color now. Let's assume we're just going to go left again and we're going to see, let's see, we want the orange one now. So let's make sure the animator controller overrides are working. Okay, he switched to orange. And we should have pink bullets, or more of a pink. So now we should have the pink bullets. Now the bullets change colors too. All right, cool. And last one, we'll do the red one. So let's run that. So now we should have red bullets and a red blaster. There we go, red bullets and a red blaster. Cool, everything's working as expected. So now what we're going to do is we're going to switch this guy back to blue. Let's just move this out of the way. We're going to drop a couple more in the scene and try this out. So we're going to duplicate him. And this one is going to be located at negative 7.127 and 0.986. And we're going to have him as an orange one with left orientation. And then we're going to duplicate him. And this one we're going to put at 8.731 and 0.758. And he's going to be red, but we're going to have him be facing right. And you'll see where he is when we go through the scene. So let's save all that. Now, one thing that this doesn't account for is when you're in the game, you may notice whenever Mega Man does a camera transition or he's moving from room to room, there's never really any objects that are there. Maybe if he's moving up on the ladder, there are. And I didn't take into account that enemies being there and freezing the enemy until the camera transition stops playing. So may do that later, but for right now, we're going to have all the enemies outside of transition ranges so that we don't have to worry about them, our player being locked and moving in a transition while the enemy is not, and they can basically hit Mega Man at any point. Kind of sucks because you're stuck and you can't really do anything because you're stuck in a transition. So we'll deal with that later when time comes. So now we're going to play this, and let me bring it over. Let's see here. My mouse at? There you are. Okay. All right, so I got hit. Now, actually, let's test this. And you can see he stopped shooting, but as soon as I come back within range, then he's going to be able to wake up. There he is. Now he woke up. So you can toy around with the player range variable. Oh, there goes my bonus ball. Next one. There's the other one that we set. I put him on the other wall. Lost another bonus ball, and then we're going to have our camera transition there. And we're going to come over here, and then you're going to see the red one, the last one, which I put up. Whoa, that's not right. That's actually, I put the wrong values on that? It looks like I did. I wonder where I was supposed to be. Totally wrote that one down wrong. Because he was supposed to be about there. Oh, it's supposed to be negative. Oops. My bad. 758. Yeah, there you go. It's supposed to be negative 0.758. Okay, we'll fix it before we save it, and then we're just going to let it run now. Hello. There we go. So I'm within range. And there he goes. Bonus ball. Cool. Checkpoint. Camera transition. Boom. And that's that. So let's, oops. So we'll take the last blaster, and that's actually supposed to be negative. So I'll save that. And that's Blaster. So that's another enemy creation video that we got through. Next one's going to be Screwdriver. He uses a lot of the same properties as this guy, except his animation is a little bit way more drawn out because he has his cannon spins throughout the whole thing. So there's actually 30 frames to that animation. So we'll have a lot of fun making that one. But otherwise, it's a lot of the same. It's firing, same events and everything. So here's another enemy that we've added to our palette, per se. And we're going to have another one. And before we wrap up the year, I'm thinking maybe scene stitching or scene transitions going from scene to scene. So we may take a stab at that as one last video before the end of 2020. Haven't decided if that's really going to be the one yet, but I just want to throw a couple more of these out there, a couple more enemies, just so we have something a little bit more in the series. So source code is available on GitHub. The link is in the description, so you can go check that out. You can go download it, or if you've been following along. So you've already had the previous project open and been working from there. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. We're building out Mega Man as we go. There is no final product yet, but we are working towards that through each video. So stay safe out there, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.